welcome to our Wrestlefest review. I wasn't expecting to do this one quite yet, but I've actually had a few requests for it, and I will take just about any excuse to play or talk about this one. This game is considered to be among the best, if not the absolute best wrestling game in the arcade. It was developed and published by Technos, a company we'll mention several times in upcoming episodes. Aside from some of the other great titles that this now defunct company produced, they were behind some of the better wrestling games that we got to play over the years. So whether it was in the arcades or on home console, their contribution will always be remembered and appreciated. Now I want to take you back to 1991, which was a really good year for arcade video games. Superheroes were well represented with Spider-Man the arcade game and Captain America and the Avengers. We got Knights of the Round, a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game, and The Simpsons to give us legions of baddies to beat up. We had the Quarter Goblin Terminator 2 and Sunset Riders, which were brand new and exciting variations on the otherwise common shooter theme, and Capcom's latest marvel, Street Fighter 2, was about to take the world by storm and define the entire two-player fighting game experience. All of these games would go on to have great success on consoles as well, but at this time, if you wanted to play these awesome new releases, the local arcade was the place to do it. This would also be the year that wrestling fans around the world would get something to celebrate. Wrestlefest, a sequel to the only WWF game in the arcades, Wwf Superstars from 2 years earlier. The mechanics were similar, but what a difference in style. The graphics, the music, the atmosphere, the mix of larger-than-life superstars, along with some of the most respected workers in wrestling history. The Legion of Doom performing their signature Doomsday Device clothesline. To a wrestling fan, this was the only game in the arcade, and it was often where my allowance disappeared every week. But after we put aside all the fandom and nostalgia, we asked a burning question. Was Wrestlefest a good game? Or was it just a guaranteed way to separate wrestling fans from their money? Now, the first thing I noticed was how good the game looked. In terms of graphics, it blew me away. There was no question that these were the official WWF Superstars, not the knockoffs we were getting in games like Exciting Hour and Wrestle War. From Jake the Snake's raised eyebrow to the $1 Million Man doing his rubbing the fingers together thing, they went all out in capturing the personality of these characters. The animation of the moves and the way the ring would shake when you slammed your opponent into the cage, it all gave the impression of high impact, and the moves were animated perfectly. If I had any complaint about the visual presentation, it was just that there was no way to perform the taunts that the CPU would do. After performing a particularly impressive move or sequence, it would have been nice to show off a bit, but we had to be content with a well-timed, "Ooh yeah," done in our best Macho Man voice. Yeah, I did it. I have no shame in it. The game's sound was hit or miss. The subdued music during the matches and the louder jams at the attract screen were great. The commentary guy calling out the action was probably the best we ever had. But then you got the famous Legion of Doom promo, hosted by a Mean Gene that none of us had ever heard before, followed by Hawk spitting out something incomprehensible about gerbil-faced geeks that didn't even sound like him. It definitely could have been worse, but at that time, audio in the arcade games was certainly able to do speech pretty well. And they even do it in other places in the game, so why those particular audio pieces didn't get the same love was something I couldn't understand. I mean, even Mike McGurk doing the intros sounded way better. Now, as we all know, graphics and sound don't mean a thing if there isn't a half-decent game in there. So, after you've been pulled in by the neat little profile screens of each character, you've fed the machines. And now you're treated to a choice of game modes. You choose between Royal Rumble or Saturday Night's Main Event. In Royal Rumble, you select a superstar from the roster of 10 and compete in an every-man-for-himself battle royal among the entire cast. The game starts with 6 wrestlers in the ring, and a new one enters shortly after one gets eliminated by either pinfall, submission, or being thrown over the top rope. Be the last man standing, and you get treated to a slideshow of the whole roster and the ending credits. In Saturday night's main event, you choose 2 superstars to become your tag team and bring them up through the ranks, usually 4 or 5 matches depending on the machine's settings. And then you face the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors themselves in the most challenging match imaginable. These guys have extra health, they do extra damage, they're the only characters in the game to have a double team finisher. And if you get hit by this, you're either reaching for another quarter to recharge your health to full, or you're facing a game over screen. After you defeat the LOD in main event, you climb the ladder again versus other teams at a higher difficulty level. Now, as I mentioned, you can add money at any time to recharge your health and reset the time limit in your matches. That also works in the Royal Rumble game mode, but make sure if you do add money, you aren't too close to the ropes. You can still be tossed out of the ring no matter how much health you have, and as a matter of fact, it's easier to be tossed out when you're at higher health. Controls for the game? Well, they couldn't be easier. You have a punch button, you have a kick button. You can throw standing strikes, but eventually you're going to end up locking up with your opponent at some point. You mash the buttons or to get the grapple advantage, and then you can either do a wrestling move or whip the opponent into the ropes for a rebound attack. Almost everything is done with just one button press. Pressing both buttons lets you run, which gives you its own set of follow-up moves like clotheslines or drop kicks. You get a couple of moves you can do to a grounded opponent. What they are is dependent on your superstar and the position the opponent is laying in. When the opponent is at low health, they fall in sort of a diagonal prone position, which means they're pretty much ready to be put away, and let some superstars do a finishing move like a leg drop or the big splash. You can climb to the top rope, land big strikes on a grounded or standing opponent. You can perform double team moves in the corner, and you can even occasionally dizzy them and grab them from behind with a sleeper hold. There really is a fair bit of stuff you can do with just those 2 buttons, including tossing a superstar outside and laying into them with stairs or equipment that's laying around out there. The usual countout rules do apply. Also, during certain times in a match, you'll see a message saying that your partner is powered up. If you tag them in at this point, they will always have grapple advantage for about 15 seconds or so. This obviously only applies in the Saturday night's main event mode. The trade-off for the simplistic controls, however, is when it comes to the actual wrestling. You don't choose your moves. When you have grapple advantage and then hit the button to do something, the game decides what move it will do. This is based on your superstar and how much health the opponent has. You usually start by doing snapmares and body slams, then the algorithm will decide your opponent's hurt enough, so they'll become suplexes and power slams. And then finally, when the opponent is really softened up, your finishing move can be performed. The opponent's health, your health, how many attacks you've performed in a row, these things all affect whether the opponent can counter your attacks. You need to be especially careful with running attacks, as the opponent can counter these with a back body drop, which can send you flying through the air, and yes, that can get you eliminated in the Royal Rumble. The game also decides if you get grapple advantage at all. Button mashing will get you most of them, but sometimes no matter what you do, the game decides that either you or the opponent is going to come out ahead when you lock up. This can feel unfair when you reach higher stages in main event, where no matter what you do, the LOD is just able to have their way with you. This is where the game just kind of feels like a cash grab. I play main event, I just like to make it to the LOD, possibly beat them on 1 quarter. If I lose, I start from the beginning again. The value's there when you get to play 4 or 5 matches on 25 cents. Royal Rumble is definitely the more action-packed mode. It's chaotic, you're constantly having to defend yourself from someone. There's double pins, guys flying outside from misjudged running moves. It really is fun, even if it doesn't have the length of the tag team mode. So with that said, the question we had was, is this a good game? It was simple to play, it had eye-catching graphics, decent sound, and it was a lot of fun solo or with another player. So many games now, they have to have a whole slew of features and a mini degree to master the controls before the hardcore player base would dare admit something's even okay. This game checked all the boxes that I feel made a great addition to any arcade, and people still, after all these years, talk about how great it was. I would honestly call this the best wrestling game to ever appear as a coin-op. And even long after I switched over to fighting games, I always kept a couple of quarters for this one. Now normally this is where we would be getting ready to sign off, but we can't just yet because while the original arcade Wrestlefest game may be obsolete, it wasn't just going to lay down and die. In 2012, a remade version with an updated roster, paid DLC, and a slew of other features was released for Apple devices by THQ and was planned to go to all the major consoles. However, when THQ went bankrupt, the license for the WWE games became exclusive to Take-Two Interactive, and they had no interest in developing this game any further. Sadly, it can no longer be found in any store. While that might spell doom for any other franchise, this game still just refused to die. Retrosoft Studio has announced that they are developing the official sequel to this game. While not affiliated in any way with the WWE, they've teamed up with the NWA and will have a 16-man roster at launch featuring stars like Austin Idol, Nick Aldis, Tommy Dreamer, and making their triumphant return, the late Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors. Featuring multiple arenas and match types, and a development team that really seems to share our love for this game, I'm excited to see what they end up giving us, and of course, to be able to review it for you. Because if there was no you, there is no me. I would just be a geek sitting here at his computer who can't stop playing old wrestling games. However many or few of you there are that are watching these, it's all the same to me, because it just makes me realize that there are more of us out there who shared these experiences growing up and have the passion for the retro wrestling. And that's what keeps me going. So until next time, this is the Real2kGamer signing off. See you guys.
It's time to fight with a powerful challenger. We snack on danger, dine on death. To bury every double-faced geek we face. Yeah!